Ever think about those situations where, like, even when something's consensual, it still feels kind of morally wrong?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're diving into today. This case really makes you think about consent and where the lines get blurry. You were saying how you're interested in how something can seem consensual on the surface, but actually be something much darker, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's exactly that. The case of Dominic Picot, it really throws a wrench into any of those, like, romanticized ideas about cuckolding.
Oh, absolutely.
And just as a reminder for everyone, cuckolding generally means someone enjoys their partner being intimate with someone else.
Right. And what's so disturbing about this case is how fast it goes from like this idea of consensual cuckolding to this awful display of power and control. It totally removes any possibility of real consent.
Exactly. So we're in France. Dominic and Giselle Picot.
Mm-hmm.
On the outside, totally normal, happily married couple. But Giselle had confided in Dominic about some health stuff that was going on. She was having a lot of pain. And get this, at first they thought it was because their sex life was,
A little too spicy.
yeah, active, let's say.
Which is just tragic when you find out what we learn later.
It's like the beginning of a mystery or something,
wow.
you know. But this is where, like, this small thing becomes this thread that unravels everything.
Mhm.
Dominic gets caught taking inappropriate photos on the metro of all places.
You can't make this stuff up.
Right?
Almost feels cliche.
But it's this little offense that changes everything. I know, right? So the police take his phone, and that's when things go sideways.
Yeah.
It wasn't even just the photos. They find more disturbing stuff that leads them to, get this, a memory card at his house.
Mm-hmm.
And the label on the card, abuses.
That's chilling.
Chilling is right.
Like, who would even think to label it that? It's like he's proud of it or something. And the stuff inside, even worse. Thousands of photos and videos, thousands, showing Giselle being sexually assaulted, drugged, abused by I don't even know how many men. And for years, this wasn't just a one-time thing. This was planned. This was calculated.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, hold on. We got to unpack this. This wasn't just cuckolding then. This was straight up assault.
Exactly. This was Dominic totally betraying his wife's trust. He completely disregards her humanity, like she's a person. This case just throws everything, those nice ideas about cuckolding out the window, because there is no way Giselle consented to this. He planned the whole thing.
And these men, he met them online, right? Like, recruited them. One source called them fornitos.
But yeah, the fornitos. He was looking for these big, intimidating guys on all these anonymous internet forums.
So he's really trying to control how everything plays out, huh?
Absolutely. The power dynamic he's setting up, it's scary. But it gets worse. He gave these guys specific instructions like no talking, no smoking. He even made them warm up their hands so they wouldn't wake her up.
The level of detail is just, I don't even know.
Exactly. That's what tells you she did not consent to any of this. He was directing a movie, and Giselle was the star, only she had no idea it was happening. And of course, he filmed it all.
It's just sick. Imagine what that would do to you mentally. Not just the assaults, but your husband, the person who's supposed to protect you, he's the one filming it all.
It's just, it's beyond disturbing. He needs to control everything, document everything. It's like he's making this collection of his wife's, suffering.
You mentioned the ethical stuff earlier, and this is where it gets really messed up. Because some of these men, they actually said they thought it was fine. Like Giselle was in on it.
Oh, yeah. They love to play the victim-blaming card.
I know, right?
They were happy to just go along with whatever fantasy Dominic had cooked up. It's kind of scary how much they had to lie to themselves to believe that.
It's so sad. Because from what I read, Giselle had no clue why she was in so much pain. Remember she had that undiagnosed medical thing going on?
Right, and that detail is so important here. Giselle was dealing with vaginismus. It's this thing where the muscles in the vagina spasm involuntarily. Basically, sex would have been super painful for her.
Oh, God. So on top of everything else, she's being drugged, assaulted, and she's also in horrible pain.
Exactly, and no one thought to actually figure out what was causing it.
It's like she's a victim twice. Once by her husband, and again by the system that didn't help her.
Exactly. It just makes her more vulnerable to him. This whole case just keeps getting worse.
Yeah.
And it didn't stay quiet. This wasn't just some hidden thing.
No, definitely not.
This went to court. All these awful details came out. It sparked a huge conversation in France.
As it should. Stuff like this needs to be talked about.
Absolutely. Cases like this force us to deal with these hard truths about power and consent and just how dark human sexuality can be.
And Giselle, you have to give her credit. She refused to stay quiet. She could have stayed anonymous. She chose to come forward, to tell his story, to make sure Dominic was held accountable.
It's amazing, really. In a world where people are so quick to blame victims, she refused to be silenced.
It's really powerful.
She took back control of her own story. She reminds us that the shame belongs to the people who do these things, not the victims.
And she said, this is a direct quote, she said she was sacrificed at the altar of vice, seen as a rag doll, a garbage bag.
That's just heartbreaking. To be seen as an object like that, it shows you exactly what happens when someone's stripped of their agency, their self-respect, their everything.
Thankfully, this didn't just end with words. Dominic Picot faced justice.
As he should have.
He was sentenced to life in prison.
Life. That's how seriously they took what he did. And this is important. A lot of the men who went along with him, they got convicted too. This wasn't just one bad guy. This was a whole network of people who made this abuse possible.
That's a really powerful message.
Yeah.
It wasn't just him. It was like the whole system kind of failed her.
Exactly. This whole case really shows how important it is to speak up, to call out this behavior, and to support people who've been abused. If we don't, it's like we're letting the abusers win.
You were saying earlier you wanted to talk about the legal side of this. What can you tell us about the trial and what happened to everyone involved?
Oh, the trial was huge in France. Everyone was talking about it. It really brought the whole issue of sexual assault and coercion to the forefront.
It's good that it got so much attention.
Yeah, definitely. Dominic Picot ended up getting sentenced to life in prison.
Wow, life. That's a long time.
It shows how seriously they took his crimes, and like I said, it wasn't just him. Almost 50 other men were charged with stuff related to Giselle's abuse.
50? Seriously?
Yep, most of them got sent to prison too.
God, that just shows how widespread this was.
It does, and it shows how important it is to come forward, to challenge those old ways of thinking, and to be there for survivors.
So where do we go from here? What can we take away from this whole horrible situation?
I think it's a wake-up call. Even if you trust someone, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be careful. If something feels off, if someone's hurting, we have to listen to them, believe them, and do something about it.
We can't just ignore it because it's easier to look away.
Exactly. We can't be afraid to have those tough conversations about consent and power and looking out for each other.
It's heavy stuff for sure, but so important to talk about.
Absolutely. And especially these days with technology making it harder and harder to figure out where the lines are, we got to talk to each other, to kids especially, about what a healthy relationship is, what respect means, and where the boundaries are.
It's a conversation we all need to be having.
For sure, because at the end of the day, it's about making the world safer for everyone.
Couldn't agree more. This deep dive into Dominic Picot's case has been really rough, but it's shown just how important it is to be careful who you trust, how complicated consent can be, and how much power there is in speaking out against what's wrong.
It reminds us that everyone has a part to play in making sure something like this never happens again.
And that's where we'll leave it for today. To everyone listening, really think about what you've learned. Don't be afraid to have those hard conversations. Fight for what's right, and never underestimate how powerful your voice can be.
Because staying silent just lets the bad guys win. If we work together, we can make things better.
That's a great place to end.